everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. You guys sent in some super interesting stuff about India's education system, and we're going to take a good look at it all today. We've got some excerpts from an EduTalks episode where they actually give India's education minister like a report card score. So it's kind of funny to think about, right? Like he's getting graded.
Yeah, it is interesting how they try to sum up a whole country's education system with just a number. But hey, it definitely got my attention.
For sure. It's like a headline that makes you want to read the whole article. So before they get to that scorecard, though, EduTalks sets up some criteria for what makes a good education minister. It makes sense, right? It's not just about wanting to do good things. It's about getting results.
Absolutely. They look at stuff like policy changes, of course, but also curriculum development, how good the schools are, how much research is going on, and even how Indian universities are doing globally.
Wow, that's a lot to handle. And, India has way different challenges compared to, like, a small country in Europe. They've got over 1 billion people, and some places are really rich and others are really poor.
Yeah, exactly. Context is super important. What works in Finland might not work in India.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, EduTalks gave India's education minister a 6.5 out of 10. Not too bad, but definitely room for improvement. They said he has a good vision, but putting those ideas into action is where things are slowing down. They specifically mentioned the National Education Policy of 2020, or NEP 2020, as a step in the right direction.
Oh yeah, the NEP 2020. That's a huge GE plan. They're basically trying to change the entire education system from when kids are little all the way to university. One of the main goals is to get away from just memorizing facts and to teach kids how to think critically and solve problems. It's a huge shift in how people think about learning.
Yeah, that's a massive undertaking. But like you said, it all comes down to execution. EduTalks pointed out some areas where India is making progress, but still has a long way to go, like digital and online education. There's been this big push to use technology in schools, but what about the people who don't have good internet access, especially in rural areas?
That's the digital divide, right? It's a big issue in India for sure. But it's really interesting how they're trying to solve it. They're launching satellites to bring internet to even the most remote villages. And there are programs to give teachers tablets and train them how to use technology in their lessons. So it's not just about having the tech trade. It's about making sure teachers and students know how to use it effectively.
So it's a two-pronged approach, right? Technology and training. I hadn't thought about it like that. Another thing they talked about was how India is having trouble getting into the top 100 in those global university rankings. I guess that's connected to research and innovation, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. You need strong research universities to attract the best minds and to make groundbreaking discoveries. India is working on this, though. They've started initiatives like Imprint, which stands for Impacting Research, Innovation, and Technology. It gives funding to research projects in important areas like healthcare, energy, and sustainable development.
So they're focusing on research that directly helps India. That's pretty smart.
Yeah, they're thinking long-term. But building that kind of research infrastructure and culture takes time.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But it's not all bad news, right? EduTalks did mention some good things happening with skill-based education and vocational training. They said India's on the right track, just needs to move faster.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. India has a ton of young people, and giving them practical skills is super important. One interesting thing they're doing is teaming up with businesses to create apprenticeship programs that teach skills people actually need in the real world.
Oh, that's smart. So instead of just general vocational training, students are getting experience in specific fields.
Exactly. But here's the big question that EduTalks brought up. Does the NEP 2020 actually address all of these challenges, like the digital divide, research funding, and skills training?
It sounds like a good plan on paper, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out.
For sure. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in part 2.
Yeah.
We'll compare India's approach to those big names in education, like the US, Finland, and Germany.
It's like a global education showdown. I can't wait to see how it all stacks up. Stay tuned. All right, we're back for round 2. We've talked about what India's trying to do now. Let's see how their education system stacks up against some of those global powerhouses. It's like we're setting up a boxing match, but with textbooks instead of boxing gloves.
Yeah. A battle of the minds. But we're not trying to pick a winner here. It's more about seeing what we can learn from each country's approach to education.
Exactly. It's about taking the best ideas and figuring out how they could work in India. So first up, the USA EduTalks gave them an 8.5. They've got well-funded schools, tons of technology, and those big-name universities that everyone knows.
Yeah, the U.S. definitely have a lot of resources.
Right.
But I'm curious, how does their teacher training compare to India's? In the U.S., you usually need a specific degree in education to become a teacher. In India, there are a lot of different ways to become a teacher. Some go to traditional teacher training colleges, but there are other paths too.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the different ways people become teachers. Does that affect the quality of teaching in either country?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure. Both systems have their pros and cons. In the U.S., teachers might have more specialized knowledge, but the system can be pretty rigid. In India, there's more flexibility,
Hmm.
which is good for adapting to different local needs, but it also makes it harder to ensure consistency and quality across the board.
I see what you mean. It's like comparing apples and oranges.
Exactly.
Oh,
Each system is a reflection of its own country's culture and history.
okay, fair enough. So let's move on to Finland, the education superstar. EduTalks couldn't stop praising their free, high-quality education system. They talked about how they focus on creativity instead of piles of homework, and they have these amazing teacher training programs. It almost sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, Finland's system is definitely impressive. No doubt about it. Their teacher training is really something else. All teachers need a master's degree in education, and they really emphasize research-based teaching methods and personalized learning.
Wow. A master's degree for every teacher. That's setting the bar pretty high.
It is. It shows how much they value the teaching profession. And their training goes beyond just the academic stuff. Teachers are trained to create a supportive and inclusive classroom environment, to understand the emotional and social needs of their students, and to foster a genuine love of learning.
So it's not just about cramming information into kids' heads. It's about helping them grow as individuals. I can see why they get such high scores.
Right. But remember, Finland is a relatively small and homogeneous country. Trying to do the same thing in India with its huge population and incredible diversity would be a massive challenge.
That's true. You can't just copy and paste a system from one country to another and expect it to work the same way.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from them. Finland's success shows how important it is to invest in teachers, encourage creativity, and create a learning environment where all students feel supported and can thrive.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about Germany. They got a 9 out of 10 for their focus on vocational training and free university education. It sounds like they're doing a great job of getting students ready for the workforce.
Yeah, Germany's dual education system is really interesting. Imagine a 16-year-old in Germany who wants to be an electrician. They could join a program where they spend part of their time in a vocational school learning the theory and technical skills, and the other part of their time working as an apprentice at a real electrical company, getting hands-on experience.
So it's like learning by doing, but in a structured way with guidance from experienced professionals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when they graduate, they're not just qualified electricians, they've already built connections in the industry.
That's a pretty awesome setup. Do you think something like that could work in India?
I think India could definitely adapt the dual education model.
Yeah.
It fits well with their focus on skill-based learning and their need to prepare their young workforce for the jobs of the future.
Right. It could be a win-win for students and the economy. So we've got the U.S. with their resources, Finland with their focus on well-being, and Germany with their practical skills training. What are your main takeaways?
What's really fascinating is that each country has a different priority. The U.S. is all about individual achievement and competing on a global scale. Finland is focused on developing well-rounded individuals and making sure everyone feels supported. And Germany really emphasizes practical skills and getting people ready for the job market.
So it's like each country has its own recipe for success with different ingredients and measurements. What do you think India's recipe should look like?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's exactly what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at where India has the potential to really excel, considering its unique strengths and challenges, and we'll discuss what it would take to make their education system truly world-class.
Ooh, I can't wait. This is getting good. Stay tuned for the grand finale. All right, we're back for the final part of our global education journey. We've seen how the US, Finland, and Germany do things, but now it's time to focus on what's next for India. What can they learn from these other systems, and what are their own unique strengths that they can use?
It's like we've been shopping for ingredients, and now it's time to cook up a recipe that works for India.
Haha, I like that analogy. So where do we start? We talked about those recommendations from the EduTalks episode, implementing the NEP 2020 More Money for Education, focusing on skills training, boosting university research, and better teacher training. Those are all big goals, but what are some actual steps India could take?
Well, let's start with the NEP 2020. A great plan, but putting it into practice is where the real work begins. One important thing is making sure everyone understands what the policy actually means. Think about a teacher in a rural village who's been teaching the same way for years. They need to be trained on the new curriculum. They'll focus on critical thinking and how to actually teach it in their classroom.
So it's not just about giving them a new textbook and saying, figure it out. They need support and training.
Exactly. India's trying some cool things here. They've got online platforms where teachers can access training modules, share ideas, and connect with mentors. They're also sending experienced teacher trainers to remote areas to help bridge the gap between the policy and what's happening in the classrooms.
That's awesome. It shows they're serious about helping teachers. Now, what about money? EduTalks said India needs to spend more on education, but where should that money go?
Teacher salaries are a good place to start. If you want to attract and keep good teachers, you need to pay them well. But it's not just about the money. Imagine a young, enthusiastic teacher who gets sent to a school with a leaky roof and no proper bathrooms. It's not very motivating.
You're right. It's about making teachers feel valued and giving them a good working environment. And that means things like decent facilities, updated textbooks, and the technology they need.
It's exactly. India has this goal of bringing broadband internet to every village. Imagine if every school had good internet access, digital learning resources, and teachers who knew how to use technology in their lessons.
That would be amazing. It would give everyone a fair chance and open up so many opportunities for students, even in the most remote parts of the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about skills training. We talked about how important it is for students to learn practical skills that they can use in the real world. How can India make that happen?
Well, they could learn from Germany's dual education system. Instead of just learning things in theory, students could get real-world experience through apprenticeships and internships. Imagine a student who loves coding, working with experienced programmers at a tech company while they're still in school.
That's a great example. And it doesn't have to be just tech. They could do the same thing for healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing, any field where practical skills are important.
It's about connecting education to real life, making it relevant and interesting for students, and getting them ready for successful careers.
Exactly. Now let's not forget about university research. India has so much talent, but they need to create an environment where innovation can thrive.
So more funding for research is important, but it's not just about throwing money at the problem.
Right. It's about building a research culture, encouraging universities and businesses to work together, and supporting young researchers by giving them mentors and opportunities to share their work globally. Imagine an Indian scientist discovering a new source of renewable energy or developing a life-saving medical technology.
That's the kind of impact research can have. It can solve real-world problems and make India a leader in the global knowledge economy.
Absolutely. And finally, we come back to teacher training, the foundation of it all. How can India make sure their teachers are ready for these big changes and can prepare students for the future?
Well, they could learn from Finland. Imagine a system where being a teacher is a highly respected profession, where teachers need advanced degrees and get ongoing professional development throughout their careers.
That's a powerful idea. And it's not just about having the right qualifications. It's about creating a culture of continuous learning where teachers are encouraged to try new things, innovate, and share what they know with each other.
So it's about building a community of passionate educators who are dedicated to helping the next generation of thinkers, innovators, and leaders.
Well said. It reminds us that education isn't just about filling kids' heads with facts. It's about empowering them to reach their full potential and make a positive impact on the world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling hopeful but also realistic. India faces some big challenges, but they also have incredible strengths. It's like they're at a crossroads with a chance to create a truly world-class education system.
And the choices they make today will have a huge impact on the future. The EduTalks episode gave India's education minister a 6.5 out of 10. But in the end, the grade that matters most is the one India gives itself. They get to decide what kind of future they want for their children and for their country.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new things to think about and inspired you to keep learning about this important topic.